All right, welcome, Gennie.
Hello.
She's going to be one of our co-presenters today. And I think Alex is joining us in just a moment. But why don't I go ahead and get started? So I've told you all kind of the logistical things about where to make comments if you need to, where you're going to ask questions. But let me really quickly actually introduce our program. So what we are actually going to be doing here today with Something is Brewing. So what is the plan for this afternoon? We're going to be talking about tea. Oh, speaking of, I just had mine delivered right here and it smells really good. So in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to be, as I said, turning things over to my colleagues. So Gennie and Alex are going to be joining me today. So really quickly, let me go ahead and introduce all of our cooks and our tasters for today. First up is Alex Rasic. She is the Homestead Museum's Programs and Audience Engagement Director, and she is an eater of adventurous historic foods. So she's cooked some of our best stuff so far this year. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Next up is our programs manager and baker extraordinaire, that is Gennie Truelock. She's going to be cooking today as well, or tasting today as well. And then once again, my name is Jennifer Scerra, and I am the museum's program and design coordinator. So our program today, how did we decide to do this? So way back a year ago, when the pandemic was still brand new, if you guys can remember back that far, restaurants were closed, grocery store shelves were sparse, and Gennie and Alex decided that since they were spending so much of their time cooking and thinking about food, that they wanted to turn this into a chance to think kind of about the meaning of food and how people have, fed themselves in the past, how they have taken care of themselves. So luckily for all of us here, the Homestead Museum actually has a pretty lovely collection of early Los Angeles cookbooks and other food ephemera. So it was really kind of the perfect chance to really dig into all of those items, some of which we hadn't done very much with in the past. So that is what Gennie and Alex did. I joined them later that summer, and every week since then, we have been cooking, eating, and writing about historic recipes on our museum's blog, which you can see a picture of here. So we have a whole year of this now that's been archived, and we have tested all kinds of foods during that time. So we have made butterscotch pie, we tested egg foo young, we did watermelon pickles, and of course, each of those foods have really interesting stories and people from the past who are connected to them. So building on this work that we have done this past fall, we decided to do a special deep dive into the Thanksgiving holiday, and we cooked an entire 1920s Thanksgiving menu minus the turkey. And that program was so much fun that we decided to do it again today, but with Mother's Day and with tea recipes. So what is it exactly that we are going to be doing today? We are going to be thinking about taking tea and eating tea foods. So I'm going to ask all of you out there in the audience, what do you think of when you hear the words taking tea? So it might be sort of gossiping women in pearls. It might be dainty little crustless sandwiches. It might be young girls having a tea party. So that made us wonder this question: how did tea in the United States come to be associated so strongly with women when it isn't necessarily in other parts of the world? So we are going to attempt to answer that question in the next hour and a half, while at the same time we have prepared 8 different foods, and we're going to be tasting those live. So we're going to share some history. We are going to talk a little bit about the ingredients that went into everything, how we found these different recipes, but at the same time, we are going to be looking at that greater history of taking tea and what it has meant to women here in California. So that is our plan. I'm going to say once again, we invite you to ask questions along the way and leave comments. But I'm going to turn things over to Gennie Truelock because she is going to set the stage for our tea here. And I think going to be talking about how taking tea came to be a thing in the first place. Right, Gennie?
Absolutely. And for those that have asked in the chat about getting recipes, I've dropped a link to the recipes that we're using today in the chat, as well as the Q&A. So you can see those there. Also, they are going to be sprinkled throughout the program. So if you would like, you can The program will be up on YouTube sometime tomorrow, most likely. You'll all be getting a link sent out to you. So you can rewatch the program, kind of fast forward to the parts that you're most interested in. So we are talking tea today. So there's lots of different aspects of taking tea, but where I would like to start is a little bit about the history of tea itself. So hopefully you are all seeing a very interesting looking plant on your screen right now. This plant, as well as ancient China, really is how the whole process of taking tea and tea drinking got started in the first place. So the migration of tea to the Western societies is a pretty interesting story. And it all starts with a really cool kind of mythological legend. It starts with one of the three nobles that ruled ancient China. And this particular ancient noble was known as the divine farmer. And it is said that he was boiling water one day, and a leaf from this tea plant fell into his boiling water, and that's what allowed him to create tea. And he extols the virtues of tea throughout Southeastern Asia, and where the plant's natively grown, and the drink really starts to gain popularity. So now let's fast forward to the 8th century, and tea houses are extremely commonplace in China at this time. And tea plants are also being grown in Japan and other parts of Asia as Buddhist monks take the plant along with them on their travels as they're spreading Buddhism. And eventually, along with traders on the Silk Road, the plant spreads from China to the Indian subcontinent, to the Iranian plateau, and throughout the East, it becomes a very popular beverage. And it really isn't until 1557 that tea drinking starts to infiltrate the Western societies. So it isn't until Portugal, the country of Portugal, establishes a settlement in Macau, that tea starts to be brought back to Europe. And it still takes a little bit of time for it to really catch on. One of the things that helps is that during the 17th century, black tea is invented in China. Prior to this, only green or oolong teas are being drunk, but through a fermentation process, which creates the black tea leaves from the green tea leaves, it kind of oxidizes the flavors also, so it stabilizes the tea to be able to make these longer journeys, especially by sea. So that's one of the things that has to happen before tea drinking becomes a bigger thing in Europe. And it also does eventually come to North America, but not in the way you're probably thinking. It wasn't by the British, it was by the Dutch. In 1624, the Dutch West India Company establishes the colony of New Netherland. And one of its most successful colonies in this group is New Amsterdam. And the West India Company, the Dutch West India Company, brings the first tea to the region, but the people here at the time really don't know what to do with it. It's said that their dislike of the brown brew probably stemmed from the fact that it was stewed for 2 or 3 hours. Now, Alex and I were talking a little earlier about how we like a darker brew, but 2 or 3 hours is probably a bit ridiculous.
That is strong tea.
That is a strong brew. And if they didn't try to brew it like a tea to drink, they also tried to eat it. So some tried to serve it like spinach with salt, cooking it up with salt and butter.
Ah.
Interesting. Others ate it on toasted bread. So maybe that was the first tea sandwich. I know that was bad. That was a bad joke. I'm sorry. So as people in North America are kind of trying to figure out what to do with this new plant that's coming to them, the British are really starting to figure it out. And the reason they are is because of the marriage of King Charles II to a Portuguese princess, Princess Catherine, this lady that you see on screen. And because she is Portuguese, she is very familiar with tea drinking. And she's the one that actually makes it popular amongst the British aristocracy at the time. It's said that when Catherine married Charles, she was the focus of attention. Everything from her clothes to her furniture became the source of court talk. Her regular drinking of tea encouraged others to drink it, and ladies flocked to copy, to copy her and to be a part of her circle. So at first, tea, actually for a long period of time, tea is really only drunk by the aristocracy, by the extremely wealthy. And it's usually served as a digestive after a midday meal, or sometimes as part of like an evening entertainment when you would have guests over and then you would retire to the drawing room and maybe take tea with, slices of bread or little cakes. So when in 1664, Charles kind of takes control of New Amsterdam from the Dutch, changes its name to, of course, New York. And he goes on to start making tea drinkers out of the colonists there. And this, of course, continues through other reigns from until 1732, as all of those colonies are being established by the British. But of course, by 1773, the American colonists are getting very, very tired of tea. In May 1773, the British Parliament passes what's known as the Tea Act. The purpose of this was really to kind of shore up the British East India Company, who had a ton of tea in warehouses in London. And they decided that they needed to kind of help shore up this company, and they made it possible for them to send tea to the colonies without having to pay taxes on it. But that didn't mean the colonists didn't have to pay taxes. And so this, of course, infuriates the colonists here, along with a series of other acts that were passed years prior to import goods. And of course, with the mighty cry of no taxation without representation, things start to get a little chaotic in the colonies. In September and October, ships from the East India Company go to New York, Philadelphia, Charleston, and of course, Boston, where they try to deliver tea, and it is either refused, the ships are sent back, it is left on the docks to rot, or of course, in Boston, they dump it into the harbor, which is something that do they still do that every year in Boston, Jennifer?
Oh, that's a good question. There's a Boston Tea Party Museum, but I have not heard anything of, they might though. I wouldn't put it past them dumping things.
Because I remember hearing a while back about reenactments and things that would take place.
Cool. They do love their historic reenactment. So I would not doubt it.
But did you guys know that there was actually another tea party that did just as much good as the Boston Tea Party, but it's kind of a forgotten one now? This tea party was held the year after the Boston Tea Party, and it was hosted by this woman, Penelope Barker. In October of 1774, she organized about 51 women together in Edenton, North Carolina, and they decided that they were going to sign a declaration boycotting British tea as well as cloth. And this is actually the very first recorded political demonstration by women in America. And one of the best things, I think, is that Barker had said at the time, maybe it has only been men who have protested the king up to now. That only means we women have taken too long to let our voices be heard. We are signing our names to a document, not hiding ourselves behind costumes like the men in Boston did at their tea party. The British will know who we are.
I love that.
Isn't that great? So they actually got together and had a tea party. They actually created their own tea Also, it said that while they were signing this document that they drank a tea made out of mulberry leaves and lavender and other local herbs. So that goes very well with the herbal tea that Alex has made for us today. So herbal tea starts to become a thing in the United States by this time. And also their act actually encouraged others to boycott British tea. So I think, even though their voices were somewhat dismissed in London, this is actually a British political cartoon drawn of the Edmonton Tea Party, showing these women to either be very homely, very, I hate to say, very stupid. They are, poor mothers. They are, kind of the wrong type of woman to be participating in this, because as well as the United States, in Britain, women had no rights yet. So that is a little bit about the history of tea, how it gets to the Western societies, how it made its way to America. But you might be wondering, how does tea time actually play a part in all of this? Because when we think of taking tea, that's when we just kind of gather with our friends and maybe have afternoon tea at a special hotel if we're on vacation, or if we're visiting someplace, or kind of gathering with friends to go and have a meal. That really doesn't take place until the 1840s, believe it or not. It's really not until this woman here, Anna Marie Russell, the Duchess of Bedford. She's visiting the 5th Duke at his castle, as one does, I guess, in Leicestershire, England. And she reports that around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, she starts to have what she describes as kind of a sinking feeling. Dinner at this time, because of new inventions like illumination, more lights being more homes being lighted, I should say, by this time. Dinner is happening later and later. And so while visiting, she asked if she could have a pot of tea and some little cakes brought to her to kind of help refresh and replenish herself, which of course it does. And she decides to kind of keep up the practice. And so when she returns home, she starts inviting ladies to come over for tea between 3 and 5 p.m. And that's how kind of the idea of afternoon tea is born. And it, of course, goes over very well with Queen Victoria. Anna and the Queen were very close friends. Anna actually served as Lady of the Bedchamber in Queen Victoria's court. And so this practice of inviting guests over between 3 and 5 for afternoon tea starts again amongst the aristocracy, and then starts to trickle out to the upper class, which this actually takes me to our first tasting. So we are going to try kind of a version of the Victoria sponge. This, of course, was named after Queen Victoria, and it was said that she commonly enjoyed a slice of this with her tea. It's also said that this was something that Anna provided alongside bread and butter sandwiches and Darjeeling tea she served to her guests. Now, the one I've made for you guys today is a little bit of a faux version of a traditional Victoria sponge or Victoria sandwich cake. A Victoria sponge traditionally contains butter. The sponge cake that I used today actually came from a 1922 fundraising cookbook for an organization known as Castler Crush, which actually was a very interesting organization that helped provide a home for homeless babies, was their motto. And this was one of the recipes kind of gathered from a local tea room in Los Angeles at that time called the Copper Kettle Tea Room, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I used their recipe for their perfect sponge, and here is a photograph of that there. And they're perfect sponge. Well, I'll get your opinion on it to see how perfect you think it is.
I'm really excited to eat this.
And then I filled it in the traditional Victoria sponge fashion. There's jam. I use strawberry rhubarb because that's what I had, and I like strawberry rhubarb. But typically it would also be raspberry strawberry. And then I use whipped cream. Though I've been hearing, and maybe somebody out there can confirm nor deny buttercream is sometimes what's used in Victoria sponges. And then just dusted the top with powdered sugar. So there's the recipe for that. Cut it into layers so you have it like little finger sandwich style and can eat them like the way the Queen did. So,
So are we supposed to eat these with our hands, or are we supposed to eat them with a fork?
No, these are I cut these a little larger, but yeah, you can.
You're delicate here. I need to.
You're meant to just pick them up and eat them.
All right. That's delicious.
You like that?
Mm-hmm.
I love it. This is what I think of when I think of tea food.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely a dessert person, so.
Now you say this is what you think of when you think of tea food. Why? What makes it tea food?
Cake. Yeah, I guess I think of cake and things that are filled with things. So this hits both of those check marks.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's really lovely. I don't know if you guys can see, but there's like layer of whipped cream, and then the jam is like squeezing out. It's really lovely. And you said this doesn't have butter in it, because it tastes buttery to me, I would have said.
No, this is a fatless sponge. Victoria sponge traditionally has butter in it, but
you get the fat in the cream.
There you go.
Yeah.
Which is perfect. It's not over, it doesn't feel very heavy.
No, that's very true. It is a very kind of light bite.
Yeah, I feel like if you had more butter, maybe in the cake, it would be too much, especially if you had a buttercream in the middle.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm like I said, this is just what I've heard in research that people are putting buttercream in their Victoria sponge. I think it would be a bit much. But try also a little bit of the sponge cake on its own if you can, because to me, I'm kind of like, it's sponge cake. It's not the greatest sponge cake in the world, but it's good.
Yeah, no, I think it's lovely. It's foamy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is
texture. So
yeah, it is very much that sponge. Like, there's a reason they call it sponge cake. It has it's a larger. There's more holes in it. It's not as tight and soft and delicious.
I think that's a great way to start a tea party. So there's a reason why it's a classic.
Yeah, so we're starting with our cream tea, which is, a little bit of, pastries, desserts, scones.
Wash it down.
There you go. All right, so
Alex just brought me a napkin because she knows.
Yeah, she just dove in here really quickly.
Thank you, Alex.
We're definitely going to need that, because with all of these different foods that we're trying today, I'm gonna need.
You can tell Alex is the mother. She watches out for us. So
that's very true.
Happy Mother's Day, Alex.
So I'm sorry, I think I just put up the sponge cake recipe there. So as you can see in the recipe, there isn't a whole lot to it. It's 2 eggs, a cup of sugar. Not a lot in it, quite honestly. And it bakes up very thin, so just bake it in a little like a half cookie sheet, really, and then just cut it into the slices.
But it does taste decadent, which is really nice.
So as the idea of tea time is kind of gaining steam in England, another tea party is taking place in New England. On July 9th, 1848, the woman that you see on screen, Jane Hunt, is hosting a tea party in her home. And she's hosting it mainly in honor of a visiting fellow Quaker by the name of Lucretia Mott. Other attendees to this particular tea party are Mott's sister, Martha Wright, Mary Ann McClintock, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
Ooh.
And during this tea party, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott share a story about traveling to London for the World Anti-Slavery Convention. Both of them are working as reformers and they're abolitionists. The other women at this party are also of like mind. And they share the story that when they get to the convention, they have some things that they would like to share about how things are going in the United States. And they are prevented from speaking. They're actually prevented from participating in the anti-slavery convention due to the fact that they were women. And Stanton would later write that it was during this tea party and telling this story that she poured out that day the torrent of my long accumulating discontent with such vehemence and indignation that I stirred myself as well as the rest of the party to do and dare anything. We decided then and there to call a woman's rights convention. So it was really a tea party that gave birth to the whole women's suffrage movement. 10 days after this tea party, because they didn't want to lose the steam of the discussion that they were having there, that they held the Seneca Falls Convention in New York, and the suffrage movement took off. So what began with this other woman's tea party grew into so many more. Over the ensuing decades, women are starting to slowly gain voting rights. And they're trying lots of different methods. In 1911, California is facing a really important election. In January of 1911, it is decided that on the October ballot, the question of women's voting rights will be put to California voters. And so suffragists here, after suffering a defeat back in 1896, really try to tackle this full force. They're seeing that other Western states are passing suffrage, and they're hoping that they can kind of build on this momentum. And so you have women like Maria de Lopez, who is the president of the College Equal Suffrage League. She's campaigning, she's translating at rallies to reach Spanish-speaking communities. You have Charlotta Bass, who will later go on to own the African-American newspaper, the California Eagle. She's writing pro-suffrage editorials into the local papers. You also have other working class women, progressives, unions, all trying to kind of bridge the racial and economic divides to kind of broaden the support throughout Los Angeles and Southern California. And they also decided to take some pretty interesting, I think, and novel tactics. One of those is supported by this woman, Nancy Tuttle Craig. And I only recently found out about Nancy, and I think that's rather sad, because Nancy was the only female wholesale grocer in all of California. And she decides that she is going to help the Political Equality League in this campaign to raise funds by selling a Votes for Women tea. And what you see on your screen there in the center is the original package design for the tea. On one side, they explained why women needed the ballot in California. And on the reverse were quotes from people like Samuel Gompers, Abraham Lincoln, all of these different people explaining why women deserved the vote. And it was, and it's really, and actually, if you notice at the top left there, Frances there, she's the one that actually designed the tea package. And it was done in suffrage colors, it was a gold wrapper around these tins. And it was through Nancy that she selected the tea that was going into these into these containers, and she also used her connections to be able to sell it to hotels, businesses, as well as individuals. And of course, suffrage tea parties were pretty popular. This article here actually talks a little bit more about how Nancy was able to kind of get this out, and that these were sold in anywhere from 1 pound to 10 pound quantities. So, I mean, they were really going big. If you needed some bulk tea, they could help you out and make sure it's votes for women. So again, along with the pins, the flyers, the banners, they were marketing it in every way, shape, and form. And it was really important to do so because they had such a small window. It goes on the ballot in January. It's being voted on in October. I mean, normally we hear for things about different measures and all kinds of things for extended periods of time. So they had this 10-month window to try again to get it to pass. And they work diligently. Suddenly, there are teas being held everywhere. I mean, as I was going through the newspapers between January and October, you would just see it covered in all of these different notices. This one in particular I thought was interesting. Jennifer's going to talk a little bit about Caroline Severance in a minute. But this is her attending a tea that unfortunately she didn't feel up to speaking at. But she did share that in all of her letter writing, she writes this little note on each of her letters that go out. For the long work of the day, for the taxes we pay, for the laws we obey, we want something to say, by the ballot way and without delay. So even if she couldn't, by this time in her life, go out and speak, she was still making her voice heard in support of women's rights. Other tea parties that are being held are for lots of other leaders of the women's suffrage movement in Los Angeles, also to bring other speakers. And of course, anti-suffragists are holding teas as well, but they never got as organized, I think, as the Votes for Women's teas did. This last one here was one that was held by Maria de Lopez at her home, Casa Vieja, in honor of Fanny Bixby, a kind of fellow supporter in the College Suffrage League. And this actually takes me to our second tasting. We're going to kind of keep with the cream tea theme. I decided to choose the Angel's Cake from another suffrage fundraising book. This suffrage fundraising book is actually from the 1880s. It was done in the New England area, and lots of different supporters of suffrage donated recipes to this book to kind of help raise funds for the cause. And I'm kind of nicknaming this one the Iron Jaws Angel's Cake. Iron Jawed Angel's Cake.
I'm curious about that.
Well, the term Iron Jawed Angel came about from the Silent Sentinels, which were a group of women led by Alice Paul. And these were the ones that were protesting outside the White House during the Wilson administration. And they were rounded up and thrown in jail. During their time in prison, they went on a hunger strike. And so they were force fed during that hunger strike. And they ended up getting the nickname Iron Jawed Angels because they wouldn't have given in by any other means. This is how important this cause was to all of these women. And it's amazing to think about all the different ways women had to fight to get their voices heard. So this is the Angel's Cake, later kind of known as Angel's Food Cake. Mm-hmm. And it is pretty much a traditional angel food cake. I looked at modern recipes and I didn't really see much of a difference, except for a little salt added in modern recipes and plus or minus an egg white.
Yeah.
I feel this recipe is more moist than what I think of as like angel food cake.
Really, it's
Yeah,
it's really the
really
same.
nice. Yeah.
And I love the curd, the lemon curd that you put with it. Nice little,
I thought it was too bland otherwise.
yes, it's a nice little burst, nice
Angel's
pop
food
of
can always
flavor.
be served with something. Yeah, this is lovely. It's got a lovely light fluffy texture too. It's different than the Victoria sponge. The Victoria sponge, even though it's light, is like crumb. It has like a crumb texture. You know, Angel's food cake tastes like, or it feels like, I don't know, kind of like an actual sponge, I guess is what I think of it. But like you can eat it. It's really lovely.
Yeah, and I think that's all in part due to the fact that it's 11 egg whites.
Yeah.
And the only
it's not gonna fall into crumbs like something that doesn't have eggs does.
Yeah, because you have to whip up all of these egg whites, and the only way that's going to happen, and I only over this past year got a stand mixer. I don't think I would have made this cake.
Picture of your Angel's food cake, Gennie. So we just had a question about that.
Yeah, so this is how it looked. This is how it turned out.
I will show you.
Before you eat it all.
Before I eat it all. No, it's got a really, like, it legitimately looks like a kitchen sponge, but it's got a really nice texture. So.
And the only way it was possible, really, and I can see why this was probably added in a later cookbook, even though the recipe had been around, cakes like this had been around since at least the 1830s, 1840s, but it really isn't until the invention of the Dover egg beater that you see on the screen there, that really makes it possible, because you can froth up the egg whites enough to get that rise, because there is no other fat. There is no rising agent in an angel food cake. So you really need that fluffy, fluffy, fluffy egg white in order to make it happen. And I saw that it went from a 90-minute process of hand whipping. Women must have had arms of steel. There's no way.
At least bakers.
Exactly. And then the Dover sponge made it possible in 5 minutes.
Yeah, Desiree says, imagine beating with wicker sticks to create a fluffy egg white.
Yeah, and I heard that the Amish make a version of this cake. There's some debate as to the origin of this cake. Pennsylvania Dutch make a version of this cake where they would use apricot tree branches, and they thought that it flavored the cake a little bit, which I thought,
how interesting.
But there is also a baker from St. Louis. His name was Linus Dexter, and he's credited with developing it. At least that's what they say in his obituary from 1899. So how it actually came to be, who knows?
Well, and both of these are pairing lovely with black tea, like
yes,
spot on.
Oh, that's so far so good.
We started with the desserty ones.
So before I turn it over to Jennifer, you might be wondering the outcome of the 1911 campaign, because we always think of women getting suffrage in 1920, but in California, we got it earlier.
Yeah.
On October 10th, 1911, suffrage passed by a mere 3,587 votes. It did not pass in the San Francisco Bay Area, but it did pass in Los Angeles. And I like to think that teas were part of the reason why.
Every vote counts.
Absolutely. And so during the Progressive Era, which is kind of the era that we're in talking about right now, women are definitely becoming much more politically and socially involved. More are going out and seeking higher education. They're working outside the home. And suddenly there are all these new realms of possibility that are open to them for the first time. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer, who's going to talk a little bit more about women's clubs and teas and how they're a driver for a lot of social and political change as well.
Yes. All right. So hopefully I have correctly switched over to my screen. But thank you, Gennie. Yes, and I'm very excited to talk about women's clubs because I have been doing some research about them. But just what you were talking about, Gennie, they carried on and they built on the traditions of women taking tea. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I am going to start with this lady right here, who Gennie already referenced, and this is Caroline Seymour Severance, and she is sometimes called the mother of women's clubs. So Caroline, she was born in 1820, and during her adult life, she was very active in dozens of causes and reform movements. So that included abolition. You had sort of talked about that a lot of suffrage comes out of the abolition movement also. She was active in temperance. She helped to set up kindergartens. She was also very active in suffrage, and they say actually cast the first vote as the first woman to cast a vote once suffrage actually passed here in California. So I don't know if that's true, but it's neat if it is. I have another picture of her here. So she is sitting here on the left, and this is a picture of her with Rebecca Spring and then Susan B. Anthony also here. So you can tell she was hanging out with kind of the big ladies of the suffrage movement. So Caroline, she is this big reformer, but I would say kind of her big gift to the world was actually this really strong desire that she had to organize and to bring people together. So she lived in Boston for many years. And while she was there, she founded what is known as the New England Women's Club, and that was in 1868. So that's 3 years after the end of the Civil War. And this ends up being actually one of the 2 very first women's clubs that are formed in the United States. So there were 2 that were formed that year, and this is the second of those 2. Now, a few years later, in 1875, she and her husband moved to Los Angeles. And amongst the other work that she does once she gets here to Los Angeles is that she tries to found a Los Angeles Women's Club. So kind of this counterpoint to the New England Women's Club is going to be this Los Angeles Women's Club. And as those of you who organize things might empathize with, she actually ends up having to found this women's club 3 times because each time that she went back to Boston for an extended stay to visit her family there, her Los Angeles club would fall apart without her being there. So she has to do it 3 times. But 3rd time is definitely the charm. And in 1891, she founds the Friday Morning Club, which actually goes on to be the largest women's club of its era. And keep in mind also, this is a time when Los Angeles is still tiny. It's like the 36th or, lower than that, largest city in the United States. But they're going to have, the Friday Morning Club is going to have about 3,000 members by the time that you get to the 1920s. So this is a picture of their clubhouse there. They outgrew their original clubhouse and they had to build this great big giant one. So despite this sort of rough start, this giant Friday Morning Club, along with a nearly equal in size LA Ebel Club, they really make Los Angeles a hub of the women's club movement during this time. But it's not just, large or even medium-sized cities like Los Angeles that get these clubs. By the late 1800s, small communities are getting women's clubs as well, and they're building their own clubhouses. So this is an example here. This is tiny, nearby but rural Covina, California. They get their little clubhouse, and they're a town of only less than 2,000 people at this time. So why women's clubs? Why would someone who is as busy and as purpose-driven as Caroline Severance bother with a women's club? And why would women across the country respond so favorably to their creation during this time? So the purpose of women's clubs in the late 1800s, early 1900s was manyfold. They were civic organizations, so they're really meant to help women become involved in society. So they're supposed to help women get into politics, into social reform, what you've been talking about, Gennie. They are places where you can do educational things. So they have literary meetings, they have lectures. And then keep in mind, this is also the progressive era, as Gennie mentioned before. So people are really starting to think about kind of the ails of society and how they're going to reform and change things to make it a better place to live. So things like unions and collective bargaining are becoming big things during this time. People really realize the power of groups to support and give strength to individuals. So Caroline Severance has kind of a quote about that. So she says, these groups of organized women could serve as a striking force for their own betterment and as a bulwark against injustice. So that's the dream, is kind of that women are going to come together in their diversity and they are going to sort of change the world. They're not always going to do that. They're not always going to wield that power very evenly. So this headline right here is just a little quick example. It's a little bit euphemized, but basically what this is saying is that this big general federation of women's clubs, so all the women's clubs kind of working together, they were grappling with civil rights the same way that the rest of the country was grappling with civil rights. But as I said, sort of the dream is that people are going to come together and work together. And so how are they doing this? How are they doing all these different things that are part of their goals for the women's club movement? They did it in lots of ways, but I will give you a clue that one of the big ways they did it was through tea and tea parties. So this is an example right here. If you wanted to raise money, you might have held a tea party like the Covina Women's Club did as a fundraiser for veterans here. If you were sort of looking to make people feel welcome, so that General Federation of Women's Clubs, they had a big meeting here in Los Angeles. And the Friday morning club, every day for those convention members, they would have a tea so that everybody could come together and, have their rest, but also have a place to discuss things. It was tea all the time. So this is a page from the Pasadena Post newspaper. And so they had a whole page, which was women's club news. And I just went ahead and went through and pulled out all of the different teas. So there's tea lectures, there's teas honoring people, there's teas when you go to these book clubs and things like that. And I will tell you also that if it wasn't a tea, it might have been a luncheon. And those luncheons probably would have served tea. So there was plenty of tea to go around. Or if the club wasn't holding a tea or a luncheon to be able to carry out these kind of social goals, what they might have done instead was work on a community cookbook. And that's what we've got an example of right here. And these cookbooks probably would have contained recipes for things that you could serve in a tea. So this is the Covina Women's Club. Once again, they put together one of these community cookbooks. And one of the recipes that they had inside there was a recipe for an orange biscuit. And so Gennie and Alex, I'm actually going to invite you guys to taste this with me, because that is one of the things that we made for today.
All right.
Orange biscuit. So you can see it right here. So basically, it's not exactly like a jelly roll, but it's got, sort of the same idea behind it, that you have your dough, and then you put your orange jam inside of it, and then you're going to roll it up and bake it up, and you guys get to try it. So enjoy.
I like it a lot. I think it's really good.
It's very good.
This is, I will say, this is the second time that I have made this recipe.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time that I did it, I must have used like extra pith from the orange, because you use orange zest in it. And my jam turned out very bitter, which I really liked, actually. It was like a really nice bitter orange flavor. This one did not turn out that way, but I still like this one.
I like the way that it's prepared, because you do get those bursts of the orange flavor, and it's a strong orange flavor, but not bitter like you had said the last one came out. Mm-hmm. And it's balanced so nicely by, the fat that's in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a nice buttery biscuit.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's delicious. It's a nice balance of sweet with the citrusy, because even though it isn't like
Yeah.
Any time of day.
So
Forget
many
about the
foods
morning.
are delicious any time of day. I think it was even better hot. So the biscuit, biscuits are really good warm. So it's an even better kind of biscuit experience when it's first made. But I think it's really good with like coffee or something like that. Tea.
Yes, absolutely. That's good. I like it.
That's very good.
Ooh, let me do also. I almost forgot to do this also. This is the recipe right here, and you can find it. We've got all of our recipes. If you aren't able to grab the link to grab our list of recipes, you can also get them off of our website. So if you go to our calendar of events and you click on Something's Brewing, that'll take you to its sub page. And on that sub page in the description of Something's Brewing, there's a link there to get all of our recipes for today.
Desiree is asking about blog posts about the food that we're making. So I'm putting a link in the chat to our From the Homestead Kitchen blog series, and you can find a lot of those there. So it'll be there in just a second, Desiree.
So we've got some special ones that we've never made before for today, but some of them have appeared on our blog before. So you might be able to see some of those. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for trying that.
Thank you for making it. It was really good.
So women's clubs, I think they're really cool, but there's lots of other places to have tea. So I think, Gennie, you were going to talk to us about other tea places.
Absolutely. And yes, thank you, Alex, for dropping that in there. I was just going to go pull that, but thank you for doing that.
We're a good team.
Yes. All right. So yes, tea is happening all over the place. Not only is it happening in people's homes, it's also happening in tea rooms. Tea rooms are a kind of very interesting new enterprise in the United States, at least. Prior to the tea room, women, and I'm speaking mainly of middle and upper class women, had very few places that they could actually go to have a meal prior to the 1920s. This was another kind of like, I never thought of this before, light bulb moment for me. Many restaurants did not allow women to dine there unchaperoned, meaning they had to have a male companion. The same happened in hotel dining rooms. So if you were traveling on your own, you might have to have room service, because if you did not have a male escort to go down to the dining room with you, you may not be permitted to sit there.
That's intense.
Isn't that crazy? Because it might be perceived that you were an improper sort of woman hanging out in these places where men congregate, and hotels and dining halls and restaurants didn't want to get a bad reputation. Coffee houses at this time are kind of considered male-centric spaces, along with, of course, saloons. So the places for women to gather together and actually eat publicly are extremely limited until the tea room. Now, what kind of sets the tea room apart is that it wasn't actually meant to look like a restaurant or a cafe. The goal of kind of an independent tea room was to make the whole world home-like. They would host their guests as visitors to one's own home, and it was intended to provide kind of a comfortable and cozy space, which I think the image that you see on screen of the Samovar tea room in Pasadena around 1913 really kind of depicts that. Not only could you go and have tea and chat with friends about things that are on your mind, issues that you might be dealing with. Also, you could shop a little. That was a thing with a lot of these early tea rooms, is that everything that surrounded you was also for sale. So you could pick up a new plate or whatever you see that might catch your eye. But the Samovar tea room wasn't the first tea room in Los Angeles. That distinction actually goes to the Copper Kettle tea room, whose recipe I used for the sponge cake. The Copper Kettle, this ad that I found for them dates to about 1908. So that is the earliest mention I could find of them in local papers. And it was actually owned by two sisters, college graduates, Harriet and Mildred Morris. And they were helped by their friend Beatrice Wigmore. This is a picture of the copper kettle. And it was decorated in kind of a Chinese and Japanese decoration. And they also sold Chinese and Japanese basketry and other gift wares in their shop. And it was good that they were friends with Beatrice Wigmore, because Beatrice was very well known in Los Angeles society circles. And this is another image of the copper kettle a few years later. So I guess business was good because they got to like redecorate. And it became quite a popular place to go, as you can kind of see in this article, also written in 1908 from the Los Angeles Herald, talking about how it's a fad to really go to these tea rooms. And a little section of that I want to share with you is also makes mention about how everything is done for the patron that might be done in a private residence. And that for the downtown shopper, the matinee devotee, so people who might be out on their own, they find that this new tea room just the place to entertain. So tea rooms start to really take off, and in another way, they are very important to women because they're also providing a new business enterprise. This article from the LA Times about why not start a tea room dates to 1901. Or excuse me, this one's from 1897, talking about how this is starting to become a thing in Chicago and New York, and that this is really a great thing for society women, well-educated women who might be a little down on their luck to kind of start a new business. A lot of these businesses were also being run out of their own homes. So it kind of brings that whole kind of cottage industry to it. This article from the Los Angeles Times from 1901 was part of a larger article about women and gastronomy, and talking about all the different fields as women are becoming more educated, especially in this like new realm known as home economics, that these are providing new avenues to women, and managing a tea room becomes this acceptable means of support for women in lots of different levels of society. And it also provides many women kind of guided by this new field of home economics with a really viable trade. And so Alex now is going to talk a little bit more about other places if they didn't want to go out, what else they could do to bring these new skills home.
Absolutely.
What else could they do?
Are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So while we know that women ran and patronized tea rooms in and around Los Angeles in the early 20th century, the places they were most frequently attending tea parties were at each other's homes. The social component of taking tea was huge. Tea parties were and still are for many a meaningful way to connect with other women. And I can say that from experience. I've been lucky enough to be part of a tea group for 25 years. So I was the baby when it started when I was 19, and I'm still the baby now at 46. So that's pretty exciting. So whether you threw a party for a close group of friends to celebrate a big event like an engagement or a graduation, or it was your turn to host a club of which you were a member, women were not at a loss for tips and ideas to make their teas memorable and successful. Cookbooks, etiquette and household management books, and combinations of all three were examples of resources that women had at their disposal. And we've got quite a few here in the Homesteads collection, some of which you see on the screen right now. In these, a hostess focusing on formality could easily find instructions for how a table should be set, which foods should be served in which order, and how. As the 20th century went on, books and booklets focused more heavily on ideals of the day, including modernity, efficiency, and economy. Everything could be done with professional attention to detail, and this extended to the home. To be really up to date, women turned to things like radio programs, newspapers, and magazines for inspiration. Columnists and advertisers baited hostesses using words like new and novel, because who'd want to be dull and predictable when you had so many options, right? As advertising increased in the 20th century, you really start to see pressure and expectations placed on hostesses mounting. This was of the advertisers and home ec aficionados making. They wanted their products and recipes and advice to be seen as indispensable. And that's still the case today, isn't it?
Totally.
I found these two nearly identical articles in the women's sections of the Pomona Bulletin and the San Pedro Daily Pilot from 1927, pitching the same unique salad loaf recipe to a hostess looking for entertaining ideas. Both articles start off with, quote, something new and different to serve when she entertains a group of friends or her club is the despair of the ordinary hostess. One article then goes on to explain that Washington's birthday gives her an excuse to decorate her house in patriotic colors and serve the Farmingham salad loaf as the star of the meal, while the other suggests that St. Patrick's Day gives her an excuse to decorate her house in so many lovely colors, serving the same salad loaf as the main entree. So basically, insert a holiday, change a few colors in your decorations, and you're good to go year round, right? Now, I came across, what's that, Jennifer?
I said those two big holidays that I always have people over.
Yeah, right? So I guess, you know, you had to plan something for every month, for sure. I came across these articles as I was doing some research on the salad loaf sandwich, which we'll be trying shortly. I had never heard of such a thing until I was looking at this booklet from our collection called Luncheon, Tea, and Party Suggestions, which was compiled by the California Home Economics Association in 1927. Quite a few of the recipes we're trying today come from this little booklet. Not surprisingly, there's a section in the publication all about sandwiches, because when you think about something you might eat at a tea party, sandwiches certainly come to mind, right? Yep. In addition to familiar sandwiches like cream cheese and chicken and egg salad, the two recipes that really got my attention were the salad loaf and cake sandwich loaf. Both have been around for a long time. Bon Appetit, Betty Crocker, All Recipes, Food Network, they all have variations of these recipes. And if you do a Google image search, you can see some gorgeous, gorgeous pictures of people's creations.
Those are fancy.
They are stunning, aren't they?
That's incredible.
So, you know, these were far from your ordinary sandwiches, and I could totally see an adventurous hostess being very excited to serve something like this to her guests. But now let's go back to England for just a moment to talk about the origin of the word sandwich as we know it today. This is John Montagu, 4th Earl of Sandwich, an 18th century English aristocrat who is said to have asked his personal attendant to bring him something that he could easily eat at a table without utensils, because, depending on what story you want to believe, he either wanted to eat something that allowed him to keep playing cards without getting them greasy, because rumor has it that he was quite the gambler, or he was simply so dedicated to his work that he just wanted to be able to consume a quick meal at his desk and get right back to business. But was Montagu really the first person to eat what we think of as a sandwich? Absolutely not. He is credited, though, with popularizing it in London society circles, and the name stuck. Flatbreads and other unleavened breads stuffed with meat and other fillings have been documented as far back as 110 BCE in Babylon. And we see similar examples in Western Asia, Africa, India, and the Mediterranean. While popular in parts of Europe, the first sandwich recipe did not appear in American cookbooks until the early 1800s. This one, for a ham sandwich, is from Eliza Leslie's book, Direction for Cookery in its Various Branches, published in 1840, just bread, ham, and mustard. But there was a big something else that also helped make the sandwich popular worldwide, and that's industrialization. The working class needed a fast, inexpensive meal. We still do, right? So as factories grew, so did options for buying sandwiches nearby. By the mid to late 1800s, sandwiches had come a long way and could be found on menus everywhere from fine dining establishments to working class restaurants. Innovation in sandwich making that we still benefit from today happened in the 1920s when sliced bread was brought to market. First sold in 1928, it was advertised as the greatest forward step in the baking industry since bread was wrapped, which led to the popular saying, greatest thing since sliced bread. So that's where that comes from. As we'll see was the case with some other new things brought to market, a little consumer education had to accompany this innovation. So here is a blow up of the illustration from the ad showing consumers how to remove a metal pin that accompanied each loaf to keep the slices in place. Can you imagine that?
No.
Almost like a giant toothpick?
It's like a skewer.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it has a little hook, you pull it out and there you go. It was touted as both a Christmas gift to the public. I really loved seeing that headline. And a special gift to mothers. This ad for clean made bread proclaims that even mother can enjoy the family picnic now. I guess because she doesn't have to slice bread. Is that what they're trying to communicate? Right? She still has to prepare the fillings for the sandwich, pack the lunch, clean up, right? That still kind of sounds like work to me, but. Okay, so let's get to tasting some sandwiches, shall we? I did make the salad loaf and the cake sandwich loaf because it was very hard to decide between the two. They were both so intriguing. And Jennifer made Rubyettes, which she's going to tell you about in a little bit, for a Rubyette and cream cheese sandwich. Now, the 4-layer salad loaf contains 2 layers of canned crab mixed with pimentos, olives, and mayonnaise, and 1 layer of minced ham with dill pickles, hard-boiled eggs, and mayonnaise. Then it is frosted with a mixture of, oh yeah, there it is, with a mixture of American cheese, cream, and ground pimentos. You know, as many salad loaf recipes suggest, I presented it on a platter surrounded by fresh produce, which was, you know, part of the whole like entertainment pizzazz. Now, the cake sandwich recipe is a bit more like a cake in that the bread you make for it contains sugar and quite a bit of peanut butter, but the fillings are still savory. So the first layer contains minced ham mixed with pimentos and mayonnaise. Layer 2 is an egg salad mixture, and layer 3 is a flavor bomb of chopped sweet pickles and stuffed olives, which are stuffed with even more pimentos and mayonnaise. And the frosting for the cake sandwich is the same as the one for the salad loaf. So these creations, you know, they were meant to be showstoppers, focal points, right? Remembered fondly for a long time to come after the party has ended. And so how did mine turn out? Nailed it. Maybe not. These were tricky. These were hard to make. You know, when sliced, and I have to thank one of our coworkers, Robert Barron, who has a bread maker who made the Pullman loaf bread for us for the salad loaf sandwich, which turned out beautifully. I made the peanut butter bread for the cake sandwich, and that one looked like it was going to fall apart. So you see that one kind of looks like it's 2 halves squished together, covered in that same cheese frosting. So I did my best here, folks. This was definitely a good challenge for me, but let's see what it tastes like, right?
Absolutely. No, this is the thing I have been looking forward to most, but also not looking forward to most. There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. And the frosting, I have to tell you, like I was very dubious about it. And I did a test run a few weeks back because I just didn't think it would work as frosting the way the recipe is stated, and it didn't. I used less cream. I actually substituted half and half instead of the cream. And I ended up adding a lot more cheese to turn it into something that could actually like frost something. Okay, so what do you guys think?
Are we eating one first? Because I went with the salad loaf first.
I did too.
I like the ham and egg layer. Not so much the crab and olive layer.
The crab and olive layer is very neutral though.
I don't like crab. I don't like olives.
I will say the frosting is good with this.
Yeah. Something I wasn't thinking about before, but because it's so tall, there's so many layers. It's actually like eating a couple of different sandwiches. So you get, it's pretty, every bite is pretty different because you're kind of like moving down the cake, down the different layers. It's tall. I don't know if you guys can see, but that's like, it's like this tall on my face. What is that, like 5 or 6 inches? It's pretty big. Okay, and I'm moving over to the cake sandwich now, which I don't know. Let's try it. See what it's like. It's also tall, but not quite as tall.
No, and the cake
Really
itself.
smell the peanut butter.
Yeah, the peanut butter is punchy from a distance. All right, here it goes.
That's weird.
But I don't think it's, for me, like, I don't think it's necessarily that bad. Like, I just had the ham and peanut butter layer.
It's like a not sweet peanut butter cookie cake.
Yes, it is very cookie-like.
And the pickle and the olive layer, it's not as salty as I feared it would be in the cake. And the egg layer.
There must be a ton of peanut butter in this because it feels like eating a peanut butter sandwich. Like it's a little bit hard to
3 cups
get out of your mouth. Yeah,
I don't like
the roof of your mouth the way peanut butter sandwiches do.
What's wrong, Gennie?
I would not suggest this. It's not great. Going
the pickle olive peanut butter cheese layer is no.
You're welcome.
No.
But I'm glad we tried it.
It says that it looks like Jennifer wants to spit it out.
It's just the peanut butter's weird.
The peanut butter is weird.
There's a lot, like I made a different peanut butter loaf and it had a hint of peanut butter. This is a very sweet, like a peanut butter cake, like a peanut butter cookie. It's not like what you think of as bread.
Yeah, like would you want to put pickles, sweet pickles and pimento stuffed olives on a peanut butter cookie and eat it? Like, look.
That is what it's like.
But I will say the sandwich, the salad loaf.
Salad loaf, really delightful.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I do maybe not the crab, so you could just replace the crab, right, with other layers of things, you know. Basically, it's like put your favorite chicken salad in it, put your favorite tuna salad in it.
Yeah.
And then
you just work your way down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were very, very impressive to see like in person. So
and the frosting actually works on this.
Cup of peanut butter. Yeah, no, it feels like you took like different like egg salad and ham salad and just like put a dollop of peanut butter on top.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's not good.
Mike asked maybe it was 2/3 a cup of peanut butter instead of
maybe should have been 2/3
cups. But in the recipe it shows 2-3 instead of.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, did I read it wrong? And I just looked, but no, I think it is supposed to be 2 to 3. And I started off with like 2.5. So yeah, I don't know.
2/3. He might be right.
No, I don't think so because they have
all the other fractions are there.
But they would have 1/2 is like a printing thing, so they would have had a 1/2. They wouldn't have had a 2/3 like symbol. I think it is 2/3 of a cup.
You know what?
You're not the first person to make that mistake, though.
And you know what else? Maybe then it would have fit in the right pan.
Yeah.
Because it didn't fit in the right pan.
Oh, okay.
No wonder.
Like chefs of every age, we sometimes make mistakes when we're cooking things.
Oh, no, but look, for the frosting, it says 2/3 cup cream.
So they do have that. Yeah. Then that's
Yeah.
in the same book.
I take it
But
all.
maybe we should suggest that
Reduce the amount
as
of
an alteration
Try
to
it
the
and get
recipe.
back to us.
Yes, Mike, give it a try and let us know.
there are typos. Things yeah, and Desiree, I agree with you 100%. Dill pickles. All the way.
Mhm. Yeah, not
Put
sweet
that
pickles.
over a sweet pickle any day.
I like sweet pickles. The pickles were fine. The pickle layer was
With
fine. It was just
pimento,
funny.
olives.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
I'm glad
Okay.
we tried it. Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you for
So
putting it and insisting
yes,
on
and for my artistic beauty. I know you like that. All right. Now, before we hear about the Rubyettes, and I am really excited to try them, a quick word about an ingredient that kept showing up again and again and again as we started doing our research for this program. Pimentos. How many times have I said that word, even just today getting to this point? Gennie was the first to sound the alarm in an email to us, where she says, quote, "My takeaway from all of these different recipes is that pimentos were a huge deal," right? And she's absolutely right. She was absolutely right. They were. Canned pimentos were a new affordable delicacy that grew in popularity throughout the 1920s. Orange County was actually a hotspot for the crop. And in October 1928, a writer for the LA Times noted that the Del Monte Cannery in Santa Ana would, quote, "probably expand its capacity if housewives continued to favor the enticing pimento." And favor it they did. Their buying powder had an impact on a great many things. The time that consumers were able to easily buy canned pimentos coincided with the rise in popularity of processed foods like cream cheese. So soon recipes bringing them together were featured in magazines and newspapers all over the country. But once again, we see that early on, a little consumer education was needed. Maybe because some saw the peppers as an exotic ingredient, they weren't really sure how to use them. So newspapers gave numerous suggestions, as you can see in the article on the left. Add them to cottage cheese for color, add them to cream chicken, put them in tuna salad, put them in anything and everything. On the right, we see a questions answered clipping from 1921 from home economist Kate Bruvaughn's regular column in the LA Evening Express, where a woman named Scerra asks Vaughn if eating a combination of pineapple and pimento is injurious, and whether pimento cheese is dangerous. The answer to both was no. I think the only dangerous thing I can see about pimento cheese is that you might eat too much, right? That stuff's good. Now, because their flavor was so mild and they added a burst of color to recipes and stood out as a garnish, it's really easy to see how they became so popular once they were readily available, and they weren't feared, right? So speaking of cream cheese and exotic ingredients, I'm going to turn things over to Jennifer to talk about our final sandwich.
Yes, which is another ingredient that we saw popping up. And this one, you know, pimentos. We know what pimentos are now, even though they're like heyday was the 1920s. But what is a Rubyette? That was the question that we wanted to know. So I have some little sandwiches for you guys to try out in just a minute. These are definitely no cake sandwich. They took me all of like 3 minutes to put together, as opposed to like Alex's like 20 minutes to put hers. But they are really nice because as we were kind of talking about, you know, if you were having one of these tea parties, you were kind of battling between these two conflicting goals of being impressive for company, but you needed something that was easy to prepare. So if you wanted to kind of check both of those boxes with one food, you might choose something sort of exotic or something new that would to impress your guests. So let me introduce you all to the Rubyette. These are Rubyettes. So what is a Rubyette, you might be asking, even though you're looking at a picture of it. It is not entirely obvious. So basically, they are California seedless grapes that have been soaked in a flavored syrup. And they are sometimes described in these old newspapers as maraschino cherry alternatives. So if anywhere you would put a maraschino cherry, you might put a Rubyette. But they came in different colors and flavors. So they had three main kinds. So they had these red Rubyettes, that's why they're called Rubyettes, and they were berry flavored. They also had green Emeralettes, which were creme de menthe. And then they had orange Oroettes, which were pineapple orange flavored. And you could use them as decoration or as flavoring, you know, anywhere you wanted a little extra sweet pizzazz to your food. And so we are now going to try those. So I have 2 sandwiches for each of you to try out. So one is an orange Oroette, and one is a green Emeralette sandwich. Let me pop up my thing, because in that same cookbook that we have been cooking from, right after they suggest doing a cream cheese filling with pimentos, they also suggest doing a cream cheese filling with these Rubyettes. So give them a try, guys. You can choose which one you want to do, the orange pineapple or the creme de menthe.
All right, I'm starting with the orange pineapple.
Orange pineapple's good. Kind of reminds me of an ambrosia salad.
Mm-hmm.
It totally reminds me of an ambrosia salad.
That's good. My kids might even eat that.
Cool. Yeah, so it's just cream cheese that the chopped up Oroettes have been added to. So I used a homemade version of the Oroettes because obviously Rubyettes has been a business that's been long gone. Nobody can buy Rubyettes in a jar from the grocery store anymore. Yeah, you know.
Not as big a fan of the mint.
I like
mint.
Yeah,
I really like it, but I like mint a lot. Like a lot.
Yes, I like the orange pineapple. I think that's delicious.
They really do. They look like ambrosia salad, kind of
Mhm.
also. So it's that same,
Really
like,
good.
That's
And you serve it
delicious.
on a brioche, right?
I put them on a brioche bread. Yeah. They didn't specify bread, so I thought a little bit of a sweet bread, but
And it looks very fancy. It looks like you spent a lot of time. Well, you did. I mean, the Rubyettes, they're not, or the, you have to peel the grapes. I mean, that is
the grapes. That is a part of it. So that was by far the longest time. If you could buy these from a can, a jar in the grocery store, this would be a very fast meal or a very fast treat to serve, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that was really good.
Cool. Yeah, I think
My favorite thing, actually.
really, I would definitely not say that. They're not
For me,
that good.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know that I would eat a ton of them.
Jenny's favorite so far.
But
well, like the ice cream sounded intriguing too, like putting the Rubyettes.
yeah, so Rubyettes, they were kind of this like brief but bright flame of the late 19-teens. People really seem to love them, and then they're like gone 10 years later.
And then they missed them.
And then they missed them. Yeah.
Rightfully so.
Just to puzzle us in newspapers. All righty. Well, thank you for trying that. I think we're going back to Alex because
Yes.
we still have one more food to talk about.
We do. We do indeed. Okay. Now, let's kind of stop here for a second to look at the ground that we've covered so far, shall we?
Sure.
We've talked about tea as a tool for organizing and bringing about societal change, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how tea could provide viable business opportunities for women operating tea rooms. We noted the social component of taking tea and how it impacted entertaining and led to the creation of novel recipes and menus. And now, as is the true American way, we're going to look at how it was further monetized, right?
Absolutely.
Enter the department store tea room. In America, tea rooms started popping up in department stores in the late 1800s. The first mention we found of what we'd call a department store tea room in LA newspapers was from 1905, and it was inside Coulter's dry goods store. As time went on, other large department stores followed, including Broadway and Bullock's. So why were they created? Because women got hungry, and their options for dining out on their own, as Jenny mentioned earlier, were limited. So why not keep ladies fed and happy within the store itself? Once sated, women could go back to their shopping, hopefully spending even more money before they ventured home. Now, truth be told, this is a nice idea, right? I know some Nordstroms still have little coffee shops and cafes, and how many of us have stopped for a snack or even a meal at IKEA? I have.
I have.
Yeah, It has a place in the world, right? Now, using bullocks as an example, let's look at some of the messaging that took place in advertising the tea rooms. These two ads liken the tea room to home, as Gennie had alluded to earlier, right? That was a big theme. One says, quote, "A cup of tea in Bullock's tea room is next best to the cup of tea in one's own reception room at home." The next one reads, "It's so cozy and delightfully different, home-like and restful." Now, the next two Bullock's ads here talk up the amenities a bit more. The one on the left notes that in addition to an excellent menu, the elegance of the surroundings, the service, and the soft music complete a delightful lunch hour. It then goes on to suggest that women should visit the tea room with friends from out of town. Quote, "Show them Los Angeles from the adjacent roof garden." Now, the one on the right even goes as far as to describe what kind of plate ladies will dine on. So in addition to filling a need, the department stores also wanted to create a pleasurable experience that would keep women who were spending more time and money out of the home coming back for more. Now let's talk about the kind of food one could expect to find in a tea room, which was luncheon food. English tea historian Jane Pettigrew explains that over time, the menus served at American teas became more elaborate and substantial, including more savory dishes like cold Turkish tongue, crab croquettes, caviar toast, rolled ham, things like jellied chicken, and cheese toast. We certainly see evidence of this in the menus of department store tea rooms and in our trusty booklet. As you see in the sample luncheon menus, one could expect to be offered a variety of dishes from fruit cocktails and anchovy canapes to scalloped potatoes with baked loin lamb on top of a stuffed tomato salad. And let's not forget the desserts, right? Which we started with today, like sponge drops and lemon tarts, all kinds of good stuff there. Now, our booklet also has a section devoted to chafing dish recipes, featuring dishes with intriguing names like blushing bunny, which we'll try in a few minutes, Welsh rarebit, and English monkey. The authors explain that if a hostess wanted to prepare one of these dishes in a chafing dish for her guests, it would purely be for show. It would be a novelty. They acknowledge, quote, "The electric plate with its many appliances is proving more satisfactory than the alcohol flame. And the gas oven is so much more easily handled and the food browns so much better that it is usually preferred." Now, keep in mind that by the mid-1920s, only about half of the homes in America had electricity, let alone gas ranges. So things were about to get really different in the kitchen. Now, in addition to excessive use of the words new and novel that we mentioned earlier, we're also going to add dainty to that list. This word appeared frequently in our research, and on this slide you see some great examples. My favorite being, casseroles make dainty dishes more dainty, right? Dainty, get message received. The word dainty also leads us to explore the topic of gendered food. In his wonderful book, American Cuisine, historian Paul Friedman explains that by the end of the 19th century, it was agreed that women were partial to sweets, cakes, ice cream, salads, and generally to dainty food. He says this term dainty was the most common adjective used to describe women's taste preferences in the period from 1890 until the Second World War. That is a long time.
Yeah, for anything in advertising.
Right? He said the word could be associated with all manner of feminine things, from lingerie to clothing, all kinds of things. But with regard to food, it meant delicate, it meant colorful, it meant decorative. And at the same time that all things dainty are being marketed to women who are trying some of these new recipes at home, Friedman also explains that some men pushed back. In 1934, for example, Leon B. Moats wrote an article in House and Garden magazine where he scolded wives for serving their husbands a bit of fluff, like a marshmallow date whip. "Save these dainties for the ladies' lunches," he implored, "and serve your husbands the hearty food they crave, goulash, chili, or corned beef hash with poached eggs. No dainty food." Now, our last two dishes this afternoon carry on the theme of gendered food: blushing pear and blushing bunny. I think it was Gennie who said, add blushing basically in front of any food and the message is that it's for girls, right? Did you say something like that, Gennie?
Yep. That's very, very true.
So
And this last dish that I prepared for us today is definitely one that speaks to the look of things versus what I think the flavor, how the flavor matters. One of the first really kind of early common gendered foods is salads, especially fruit salads. This newspaper clipping that you see on screen talks about this dish called the blushing pear. Now, fruit salads were incredibly popular fare and tea rooms, and not only because a fruit was a dainty item, but these new fruit salads were novel and exciting and different. So all the things that Alex had been talking about before. Although some of these kind of decorative salads were perhaps created to be more appealing to the eye rather than the taste buds. As you can see on this cover of this homemade banana recipes pamphlet, you often found these very odd pairings of food together, kind of like the peanut butter loaf. At the top of the pamphlet page, you see this banana in a lettuce cup. Why? Who knows? Surrounded by cherries, I think, and most likely some sort of mayonnaise, because mayonnaise is hugely popular in a lot of these dressings, for regardless of what kind of salad it is. And sometimes these decorations also went a little too far. Let's just say that mistakes were made by whoever came up with this candlestick salad design. But back to the blushing pear. Like you can see in the illustration, it's very cutesy. It's meant to be a feminine dish. And the recipe that I used from the Luncheon Tea and Party Suggestions book was also, as you can see, very light on the measurements. There are no measurements for the filling that you're supposed to create with this, which is, of course, made out of cream cheese, mayonnaise, and chopped nuts. And so I went with almonds. But it is very heavy on how to decorate, how to create this blushing pear. So this is how mine turned out. It was recommended to be served on a bed of lettuce, of course, because that's what you do. And it has this very interesting dressing with it that you boil the pear juice with some cornstarch to thicken it up. And then you add whipped cream and more mayonnaise.
Ugh.
Yeah. So this is what we end up with, our little blushing pear. And you can dive right in and take a taste. I'm not expecting loads from this. It's decorated with a mint leaf and clove, which I would not recommend eating, but give it a whirl.
This, I will say, along with the cake loaves, is like the most beautiful thing that we're eating. The cheeks, Gennie added on the little bit of like red food coloring to make
the blushing.
The blushing is like legitimately like very beautiful to look at. I don't know how it's going to taste, but we'll try it.
I have been dreading this moment.
How do we get it apart?
And I have good reason to dread this moment.
I'm going to try it.
Well, that is not.
That's terrible.
That is not good. It's not good at all.
There's, I will say, like a strong aftertaste of mayonnaise.
That is not good.
Which is challenging on pear.
So lovely to look at. Again, I think like with the candlestick.
A mistake.
Name.
Grave mistake.
It's not good.
You know, the dressing is better than the filling, even though I like the texture of the filling better.
What would you put in to make it good? What would you put inside? Because the pear, that is so cute.
The pear is so cute. Yeah, canned pears don't have a very strong flavor either, so there's not much.
It needs more flavoring, and it does not need I don't think mayonnaise adds anything to it. No.
It tastes like mayonnaise with almonds. Yeah, leave out the mayo. I agree with you, Mike.
Cream cheese, a little sugar might be nice. Making it more like a cheesecake filling, I think would be very yummy. It would make it more dessert-like. Maybe that's why they have the mayo, to make it more of a salad. Yeah, it is not a sweet dish at all. And actually, I got the syrup in the heavy syrup, the pears in the heavy syrup canned. So since that's what they recommend.
Cynthia asked a question about, I don't know how you swallow something that doesn't taste good. We're doing it for you. So.
Exactly. We're taking these hits so you don't have to.
It's for history also. No, we're learning a lot. You learn as you eat. Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is beautiful.
It is. That's why I'm saying, how can you make it something that would be palatable, that would be so, because it is beautiful to serve. It's really.
That's a big no. I would rather eat your
mayo is everything.
But we've learned. There's one more thing though. One more thing we have to try, right?
There is. And yeah, Desiree was talking about also in the chat about how Southwest Law School has the specialty once a year Bullocks, which sounds amazing. And last LA City Historical Society Zoom talked about Bullocks and how to get on the mailing list for tea luncheon.
Oh, cool.
I'm gonna have to check that out. That would be amazing.
Mike had another comment about, like, could the mayonnaise be a Midwestern thing? I actually, during this era, I don't think so. I think it was an everyone thing. It just held on.
I think so too.
We think of it now as a Midwestern thing, but I think they just kept it longer.
Mayonnaise and pimentos. That's what everybody loves.
Yep.
Ooh.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, the last dish is here. And so we talked about the blushing pear. So what is the blushing bunny? It is a variation of the Welsh rarebit or rabbit, which some of you may have heard of. It was originally called the Welsh rabbit, even though it never contained rabbit. So just to confuse us thoroughly. But rarebit is basically toast covered with cheese sauce that is flavored with mustard and sometimes ale or paprika. The rarebit's origins go back to the early 18th century, but historians have not found proof that it originated in Wales, though it is attributed to someplace in the United Kingdom. But some food historians believe that the blushing bunny was created in America sometime between the late 1890s, when canned soup was made available, and the 1920s, when prohibition was in full swing. Ale and mustard were removed from the recipe, and tomato soup was added to create something similar but new. So the blushing bunny certainly found its way onto luncheon menus and in cookbooks, and we're about to give it a try. I will say first off that the color of the tomato soup mixture looks an awful lot like the cheese frosting, doesn't it? It's like,
it does.
All of the colors.
This color today. Oh, I'm excited.
Orange is the color of the day, I think.
It is, which is why I paired it on the glass plate, right? A glass plate like the ad in the Bullock's tea room with some pretty nasturtiums from the garden. So see what you think.
This is a nice palate cleanser after the last thing.
I had to have another bite of the mint Oreoette. I think it's very good.
Yeah, this is lovely.
Very neutral.
Yeah.
It tastes like a good, did you use sourdough bread? Is that what this is? Yeah, it tastes like a really good, like a tomato soup with bread dunked in it.
It's like tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwich all in one.
Yes, exactly. Just a saucy spread.
Yes, Cynthia. Yay. Cynthia says, yay, you all agree on this one.
Something good. Woo.
We ended with something decent.
There were like many variations of these kinds of recipes that we found in the cookbooks, right, guys? Like the blushing bunny, the rarebit, and then they had like the English monkey, which includes breadcrumbs and eggs, but no tomato soup, but it still includes cheese. And then Gennie came across a whopper of a recipe called the Rink Tum Ditty. Has anybody heard of that?
It's got a good name.
Which it did. I had a name that made us laugh pretty good. And that one I think was like similar to this, right? Wasn't it similar to the blushing bunny? There may have been like a couple little variations to it. I think maybe it had more vegetable in it.
It had onions and green peppers in it.
That's it. Mm-hmm.
That would be good too. Yeah, it's just like a lovely little toast with a little sauce on top.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Would be really nice.
happy meal.
Desiree had said, so red garnishes with everything, with red, so red garnished with everything green. Yes, that is
Yeah.
what you need with these guys.
So that's the course. We went through the recipes.
Yeah.
Did
So if
it.
anybody has any questions at this point, we are happy to answer them. So there was a comment also about maybe making homemade mayonnaise instead of using store-bought mayonnaise, because it does have a different flavor, that might meld better with the pear. I think that's worth trying. Once again, if you guys want to try it out, we have all the recipes available.
I thought about that because that was so common. I wondered too if that would change the way some of these tasted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know when store-bought mayonnaise becomes really like the thing. But that would be interesting to look at. Really quickly, if you guys want to get in contact with us after this program, we have put our email addresses on here. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are always at Homestead Museum. And of course, we talked about our blog earlier today. So this is kind of the culmination of a year of cooking that we have done. We have so many recipes that are on there, and we're continuing to do that weekly. So we post weekly about these foods that we are tasting and cooking and trying. So you can check that out at our Homestead blog, and then just search, because we have all kinds of history on there. If you search From the Homestead Kitchen, you'll get our cooking blog posts from there. And of course, you can go to our website, homesteadmuseum.org, where we post about our programs that we are doing. Specifically, some future programs that we hope that you will join us for. We have a continuation of our Female Justice series is coming up at the end of the month. So we're doing a Cult of Personality, the fraud trial of May Otis Blackburn. And she's very, very interesting. So she was basically the leader of a cult in Los Angeles. So it's a great story. That is going to be on Sunday, May 23rd, and you can sign up on our website. Excellent. Some folks are saying they've signed up for that. Great. We also are doing our second trivia night. So our first trivia night, we did Victorian trivia, was tons of fun. So we hope you'll join us for our Roaring 20s trivia night. That's going to be on a Wednesday evening at 6 o'clock, May 26th.
Make yourself a salad loaf for dinner.
Yes.
And come join us.
And come join us and tell us that you have a salad loaf for your dinner. We'll probably give you extra points. I will give you an extra point.
I'll give you extra points if you make a salad.
If you bring a salad loaf. All right. Also, at the end of the month, we are going to be doing another behind the scenes. So this time we're going to be talking about La Casa Nueva, which is our 1920s house. So you won't want to miss that, because we're going to have cool pictures and things that people do not normally get to see. So like some cool stuff that's up in the attic. Nobody ever gets to go up there. So you'll get to try all of those things out. All right. As we said, if anybody has any questions, we are happy to answer questions. But thank you all so much for being here. Particularly if you happen to be a mother, thank you for spending your Mother's Day here with us. And we look forward to seeing you at any of these future programs. So thanks for coming and watching us eat some good foods, eat some great foods, and eat some not so good. So we really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day. Thanks for joining us. Tell us also, send us a message if you do end up cooking any of these foods. We would love to hear your guys' impressions of them and see pictures. If you take any pictures, that would be amazing.
Absolutely.
All right. So thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good day.